shout out to all of the subscribers and members here on the channel. My name is Reese Waters, and I'm troubled. Here we are on the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death, with a president who ran on giving police immunity. So naturally, this is what we would see.
Tomorrow marks 5 years since George Floyd's death, and though his murder led to thousands of nationwide protests against police brutality, the country is now moving backwards when it comes to police reform. This week, Trump's Justice Department announced it would dismiss civil rights investigations into several local police departments, including those filed against two city departments, Louisville and Minneapolis, during the Biden administration. Calls to end qualified immunity for police officers have gone nowhere, as President Trump signed an executive order last month designed to, quote, strengthen and expand legal protections for police officers.
Justice Department ends police reform agreements and halts investigations into major departments. The Trump administration is moving to dismiss federal oversight agreements in Louisville and Minneapolis reached following the fatal shooting of Breonna Taylor and police killing of George Floyd, and dropping investigations into several major U.S. police departments. The move, announced by the head of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, reflects the administration's opposition to agreements that require reforms of police departments where DOJ found a pattern of misconduct. Now, just to highlight a section of that, where DOJ found a pattern of police misconduct. We're not just talking about a lottery system. They didn't roll dice or pull straws. This is where the DOJ has found a pattern of police misconduct. The agreements, called consent decrees, are approved by a federal judge and are used as a monitoring system for police department reform when an investigator finds that it is needed. Here's a good write-up on consent decrees, courtesy of Signal Cleveland. If the Department of Justice finds that a state or local government is violating people's rights, it tries to negotiate an agreement to fix that problem rather than file a lawsuit. One option to avoid a lawsuit is a consent decree, a type of settlement between the DOJ and the other governmental entity, typically a police department. But unlike most settlements, a consent decree is not the end of a process. It's the beginning of one that may or may not have a fixed end date. Now, looking at the actual release, it says the Civil Rights Division will be taking all necessary steps to dismiss the Louisville and Minneapolis lawsuits with prejudice, to close the underlying investigations into the Louisville and Minneapolis police departments, and to retract the Biden administration's findings of constitutional violations. The Civil Rights Division will also be closing its investigations into and retracting the Biden administration's findings of constitutional violations on the part of the following additional local police departments: Phoenix, Arizona; Trenton, New Jersey; Memphis, Tennessee; Mount Vernon, New York; Oklahoma City, Oklahoma; and the Louisiana State Police. I want to state that again. Closing its investigations into the administration's findings of constitutional violations. These are constitutional violations that have been found. Now, if you look earlier in that release, it's a whole lot of words. It's a whole lot of words trying to deconstruct Biden's findings and what the administration, the prior administration, had agreed to on various grounds. However, when you led with wanting to give police immunity, when you led with that while you were campaigning, well, that really does tell us all that we need to know now, doesn't it?
There are certain phrases that stay with everyone from the summer of 2020. I can't breathe, racial reckoning, Black Lives Matter. And then there's what 6-year-old Gianna Floyd said about her father. My daddy changed the world. Well, President Biden referenced that moment while signing an executive order on police reform 2 years after her father's murder.
You know, she told me when I saw her, she was a little girl 2 years ago. Seriously, she pulled me aside and she said, my daddy change the world.
Well, now, 5 years after George Floyd's death, a lot that did change is being chipped away, sometimes literally. Black Lives Matter Plaza in D.C. is no more. That site was paved over earlier this year. Companies are stepping away from their diversity, equity, inclusion promises. And just days before tomorrow's anniversary of George Floyd's murder, some of the heralded change to police accountability came undone too. President Trump, who was president in 2020, and his Department of Justice announced a move this week to dismiss police oversight agreements, both in Louisville, where Breonna Taylor was killed in March of 2020, and in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020.
Now, that was a very clean opening with the DEI and the Black Lives Matter Plaza and the police reform. But just as with the Black Lives Matter Plaza, with the police reform, not nearly enough was done. Not nearly enough was done. And yet what was done is being taken away.
Now, these agreements are called consent decrees. The DOJ argues in the Wall Street Journal, nobody is above the law, not even the police. Yet the overwhelming majority of police officers should be free to continue what they do best, protect and serve their communities. The Civil Rights Division will work with, not against, our brave police.
Now, help me, because if you are creating a dichotomy between working with or against the police, and you characterize oversight with departments where there has already been findings of wrongdoing and misconduct as working against the police, trying to correct a department so it works better to serve the community is characterized as working against the police. So what does working for the police look like? And how is that in any way different than being above the law?
Now, the rhetoric and the actions all taken together raise an uncomfortable question. The murder of George Floyd did change the world. But 5 years later, is the world changing back? The mayor of Minneapolis was asked about the end of federal oversight of police reform in his city, and he says, we're doing it anyway. In this announcement from the Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon ending consent decrees in these investigations, she said that unelected and unaccountable bureaucrats often have anti-police agendas. Let's start here. Former chief, you have an anti-police agenda?
Absolutely not. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Absolutely not. I've had a 33-year career in law enforcement, serving as the police chief for 4.5 years in New Orleans and another 4.5 years in Baltimore, Maryland as the police commissioner. And so I'm a policeman through and through, but there is such a thing as good policing, which is what I am committed to.
And so I want you to listen to a portion of an interview that Harmeet Dillon, the Assistant Attorney General, gave. And this is what she talks about the motivations of some of these consent decrees.
When a city's under a consent decree, cops have to suddenly fill out reams of paperwork every day. Guess what? They don't want to do that. They didn't become cops to sit there and do paperwork. So they quit, they retire, they move to cities where they do want policing to be done effectively. Crime goes up because criminals now know that the policing is not being done. Axios did a review of cities under consent decrees, and I think one of the figures is crime went up by 61% in Los Angeles County as a result after consent decrees were imposed on the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
Now, a couple things. Not wanting to fill out paperwork has been reasons given for fudging what actually happened in a great number of cases. Why is the paperwork so problematic for the police officers to the point where you're bringing it up as a reasoning to eliminate an agreement to get better when there is misconduct? Yet it's also an excuse to not give an actual description of what happened on the ground. Secondly, you're talking about statistics of crime going up? Because I'm old enough to remember when, it's funny you're talking to Tucker Carlson, I'm old enough to remember when Charlie Kirk and the rest of right-wing media was making the argument that it endangered black people in order to advocate for better treatment and police reform because police officers didn't want to police. They didn't want to do their jobs. They said that openly. So you might want to button that up before you start talking to me about crime and where it's going up and why.
According to their analysis of FBI statistics, this Axios 2021 report, violent crime dropped in some smaller cities like Ferguson. But 2 years after the consent decrees, violent crime rose 61% in LA County, 36% in Albuquerque, 27% in Seattle, 20% in New Orleans, 11% in Baltimore. You know those last two cities well. Why?
Well, there are a lot of reasons why crime goes up, and police is only one part of public safety. And a lot has to go into making sure that police can deter crime, can prevent crime, can apprehend people who commit crime. I am living proof, and the departments I've served in are living proof that we have debunked that myth that police reform and public safety and crime fighting go hand in hand, and they are not mutually exclusive. Yes, crime has gone up in a number of places, but in New Orleans, under a federal consent decree, in my last year, crime had gone to historic lows, and the murder and shooting rate had gone to a 50-year low. In Baltimore, in my last 2 years, both violent crime and property crime went down. The murder rate there was in a historic low, and a year and a half after I left, it's still hitting historic lows while still under a consent decree. So that has been debunked twice, that you cannot, the myth that you cannot reform and effectively fight crime. Reform and crime fighting go hand in hand, and we have done both in both cities, and it has happened in other cities. So what you heard is someone with no experience in law enforcement repeating what they've heard from cops who are upset with reform.
I would also add that one Rudy Giuliani and his many missteps as the mayor of New York City wanted to point to arrests by the NYPD in order to legitimize them continuing to elevate their budget money ass, despite the fact that once you throw out a gang of arrests, crime goes down, there's less people to arrest. Oh, well, that ain't no problem. Just, y'all know where to go, uptown. Yeah, so we know that goes on, number one. And number two, is this an administration throwing out crime statistics when they refuse to accept said statistics all last year?
In breaking news yesterday, the premier statistical agency at the Justice Department, you remember where David Muir tried to correct me when I said that crime is rampant like never before. He said, oh, no. He said, crime is going down. He said, where are you coming from? And, you wouldn't have to need a Bureau of Justice statistics to know that crime is worse than it's ever been. So this guy, David Muir, was correcting me, the FBI. Now, the FBI defrauded.
They refused to accept said statistics all last year while they were saying that crime was through the roof and going rampant, even though it was declining. Even though we had reached a significant low in the crime rate nationally, they would go on cable news, right-wing cable news, and talk about this massive invasion and this criminal hellscape that we were in the midst of, rejecting the statistics from the federal government. Is that what you're doing?
The Louisiana Attorney General says that the New Orleans consent decree cost more than $150 million over a decade. And as I'm sure you've heard, the cost related to hiring monitoring agencies and complying with the reforms is high. It should be secondary, of course, to the civil rights of the people that they are charged to protect and serve. But what's the rebuttal to the DOJ and to the Louisiana AG, who says that these are so expensive that they become prohibitive?
So the oversight is expensive, but the continued asks from the police department never is, nor are the settlements that they have to pay to the people whose rights they violate. That's never too expensive, is it?
They are expensive, but everything is expensive. I will tell you, having served 28 years in the Minneapolis Police Department, we could not have turned around that department without federal court mandates and federal oversight. We could not have turned the Baltimore Police Department around without that oversight, regardless of how great intentions are and people's skill sets. We needed that oversight and a court mandate to be able to do that.
Yeah, and these consent decrees have been entered into during the Biden administration, during the Obama administration, not during the Trump administration. But as we move forward, if there are these incidents, I mean, it seems as every time there is this punctuating moment of a Breonna Taylor or a Tyree Nichols or a George Floyd, the patterns and practice investigation happens during Democratic administrations and the evidence of discrimination is found. And so the next time that happens, what then? What happens to respond to a police department that there might be evidence, even at the state level, of something that needs to be remedied?
Well, first of all, that's a great question. It's likely going to be either state attorneys general to do those investigations when people file lawsuits or at the request of communities who demand an investigation, or mayors will have to figure out how they're going to do that through private expert consultants who come in and do that work. While it may not be called an investigation, it's certainly an organizational assessment of what is broken and what needs to be corrected. And so there are two pathways as I see it, and mayors will have to figure that out either through their state attorneys general or private consultants who are experts in the field who do that work.
Now, the question was, what happens now without these kinds of agreements when, in fact, there is an instance? Now, one thing that I can say is that a number of these jurisdictions, Minneapolis included, have said they're going to abide by the agreements they made with the Biden administration anyway.
The Justice Department rescinded the consent decree that was just signed, back in January with Minneapolis. They've done that, but talk about the practical effect. What impact will removing that consent decree actually have on Minneapolis?
Well, probably not too much, because the state of Minnesota, through the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, represented by the Attorney General's office, did sue the city of Minneapolis, and we achieved our own version of a consent decree. So we already have a program of, reducing, chokeholds, reducing high-speed chase, no-knock warrants, and we've had a number of reforms at the state level as well. So this is really more the symbol that it sends, which is that the DOJ is not a partner for cities and states when it comes to improving police community relations, and that's really sad, to tell you the truth.
Right now, court-ordered police reform meant to guide changes in the Minneapolis Police Department is in limbo.
This morning, the Justice Department moved to drop consent decrees for cities across the country, arguing it is government overreach.
The decree was entered back in January during the last days of the Biden administration, following several investigations in the wake of George Floyd's murder. Those found the MPD engaged in a pattern of racist and abusive conduct, depriving people of their constitutional rights. The decree is meant to ensure the department is making reforms, and it's enforced by a federal judge.
President Trump vowed to end the decrees when he took office, but Minneapolis leaders say they're doing it anyway. Joe McCoy has more.
Yeah, Lauren, the DOJ's reason for dropping the consent decree is they say the investigation wrongly equated disparities in statistics with intentional discrimination. Mayor Jacob Frey and Police Chief Brian O'Hara said parts of the federal consent decree signed in January have already been implemented. As the 5-year mark of George Floyd's murder nears, Minneapolis city officials say reforms to MPD will continue whether the Trump administration enforces the federal consent decree or not.
We're going to hold every person in our city accountable to carrying out the mission that we all have committed to.
Mayor Jacob Frey says the most important thing is restoring the community's trust in MPD, which includes the department admitting when mistakes are made.
The work is not just about what's on the paper. It's about the work that is carried out in every street for every person in our city.
Police Chief Ryan O'Hara says the department has already begun implementing elements of the federal consent decree that the Department of Justice filed to drop today. He says these reforms are also about delivering change to the officers so they have better working facilities and training.
We are going beyond what is required in any paragraph of any court-ordered reform. We will be the best police department in the nation, period.
Yesterday, Minneapolis and MPD received their first independent status report on the Department of Human Rights Settlement Agreement, the state version of a consent decree. That report said MPD has done more in 1 year than nearly any other department in the first year of a consent decree.
So we are going to be working very hard to make sure that the city actually lives up to the expectations of the MDHR consent decree.
Advocacy group Communities United Against Police Brutality says these reforms are not yet being felt in the streets. And if the DOJ won't hold MPD accountable, the community will.
And if you're telling me that the MPD has achieved some kind of goal by checking off boxes on a consent decree, talk to the Black and Native communities.
As a result of the forthcoming dismissal, the consent decree proposed in the lawsuit will not become effective. While this is not the outcome we hoped for when we stood right here in December and announced the decree, it is an outcome that we have planned for. We as a city are committed to reform. I am committed to reform and improvements. Chief Humphrey is committed to reform and improvements. To ensure that the promised progress continues throughout Louisville Metro government, we are moving forward with the community commitment, Louisville's consent decree. This is an agreement between Louisville Metro government, the Louisville Metro Police Department, and the citizens of Louisville. It includes provisions to hire an independent monitor following community input and a process for significant community input over the years to come.
We'll also have an online survey, and the online survey will ensure that all the voices are heard. A third session will take place with the two finalists. The two finalists will be at a town hall meeting, and this will give us an opportunity to introduce them and for the community to share the qualities that they would like to see in them and learn more about them. We will share the dates and times of the locations after the judge has ruled, and the dates and times can be confirmed. Thank you.
Now, I certainly applaud those jurisdictions for abiding by the agreements they made with the Biden administration, with the understanding there's a reason why you found yourselves in that situation, and that's not going to go ignored. However, even in your attempts to try and improve your department, because of the agreement that you previously made, because of the missteps that you will admit are in your past. You're doing it in this environment with this president and this Department of Justice.
In the video that I did the other day about the Civil Rights Division, I noted that around 70% of the attorneys in the Civil Rights Division have left since Harmeet Dillon has taken over, because they disagree vehemently with her shift in the focus of that department. The Civil Rights Division has been the crown jewel of the Department of Justice for almost 70 years. And again, as with so many other things in the executive branch, it is taking Donald Trump and his appointees less than 4 months to destroy that legacy of fighting for civil rights, fighting to end discrimination of all kinds. And this is just an absolute fucking travesty, man. It is an absolute travesty that these are the things that are being done. But I'm more fearful of the message that these collective actions are sending to police departments all across the country. And I believe that message is, in effect, police killing black people is basically not going to be illegal moving forward. That might be a bit of an overstatement, but I really don't feel like it is right now. I really don't feel like it is. Of course, the Fraternal Order of Police representatives are very happy with this decision from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division and Harmeet Dillon. As you know, police organizations, fraternal orders of police were very happy with Donald Trump's executive order about unleashing the police.
Now, to his point about, I don't believe that that's an overstatement. Neither do I. And I certainly give a shout out to Hawks Podcast for that when it comes to the message that has been sent, not just to police officers, but to DAs and prosecutors and to citizens. And that is the part right there. Because he talked about the Fraternal Order of Police and they were applauding this. And I can understand them applauding this because they advocate for police officers. Naturally, they would applaud a much lower bar for them to have full clearance to behave however they want to behave. Now, that, of course, comes opposed to the idea of trying to get better, right? That is opposed to the idea of trying to find ways that you can improve because, God forbid, you be accountable to anybody for any reason. And that is where I want to end this, because as much as we have seen this politicized, it really shouldn't have been and didn't need to be, because the people on the right wing, all of the people with the Don't Tread on Me t-shirts, all of a sudden get real quiet when it comes to police oversight. I can't put my finger on how they do this level of 180. It's insanity. Even the video of Harmeet Dillon talking to Tucker Carlson and a great number of other videos had people all up in the mentions, excited and applauding the idea of these dissent decrees being eliminated and eradicated. Why?
And one of the things that you uncovered, I think, is part of the answer to why our cities have become so dangerous. And it has to do with consent decrees that, have been forced on cities and police departments by the federal government. Can you explain how that has worked?
The trend has been Department of Justice, particularly under Democrat administrations, opens up what's called a pattern and practice investigation. And they basically say that anytime one cop does something wrong, it must be because there's a systemic problem in the police department. There's poor training, there's ineffective policies, there's ineffective resources, or there's racism. There's always racism that's underlying most of these police consent decrees is racism. And I'll talk about current examples as well. But so cities, by the way, I mean, you've all seen this in prosecutions. When the federal government comes after you with its endless resources and its punitive scope of measures that it can apply, even America's biggest cities with tens of billions of dollars of budgets, they quake. Because it can become very expensive and it can become a politically charged football to continue to have these federal court hearings and judges and all of that. So what typically happens is the DOJ says, hi, we are from the government. We think that you're a racist and we'd like you to enter into a consent decree where you, the city, is going to pay Bob over here, who works at a big white shoe law firm, several $1 million to monitor your compliance with this. I mean, this is a binder. Some of the consent decrees are longer than this, hundreds of pages long of minutely detailed orders of what they're supposed to do to improve their police practices. And
who comes up with those guidelines?
The lawyers in the civil rights divisions of the United States Department of Justice.
Why would that be something that you applaud? Now, you have your overt white supremacists who see this as open justification, who see it the same way that Hawk sees it from the other side. You have those people, but you're non like open identified as white supremacy, like you're regular everyday people who are still on X, which I can't imagine, but you're regular everyday people still on X. Why would the idea of no oversight over the people that are given the power to adjudicate fair and unfair, right and wrong on the street, and given weapons of life and death, why would no oversight be something that you suddenly applaud? If not seeding the exact kind of racism and discrimination you argue every day doesn't exist. Because you can't have both. You can't have both. You can't be out here pushing against runaway tyranny and governmental overreach most days, but magically when it comes to police and a brown person, whatever happens, happens. See, if that's the way you carry a business, then we have to admit to the kind of racism you tell me doesn't exist every day. And that would explain how we got here in the first place. And don't worry, we'll be back here again. The inaction of too many has warranted that.
The dumbest person you know who talks fast enough that he has convinced people that he's smart, Ben Shapiro, is urging Donald Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. And Elon Musk thinks that's something to think about. Now, a couple things to keep in mind here. Number one is that Derek Chauvin was found guilty of murder on state charges and then found guilty on federal charges, and those are being served concurrently. So if he was pardoned for the federal charges, it wouldn't eliminate any of the time that he is serving, because those sentences, those 21-year sentences, are being served at the same time. The second and the more insidious is that what Ben is presupposing, or not even presupposing, what he is explicitly stating is that this conviction of Derek Chauvin is peak wokeness. That Derek Chauvin was only found guilty because of the woke culture that had been brought about somehow, and not because we all watched that man put his knee in George Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. 4 years ago, right now, that trial was happening. I literally have TikTok showing me like memories from 4 years ago today where I was saying, hey, this is the Derek Chauvin trial, not the George Floyd trial, because George Floyd is not on trial. But people like Ben Shapiro and all of these anti-woke evangelists collectively believe that we can't possibly experience or feel things that we saw with our eyes because it contradicts with their white supremacy, which is wild because white supremacy says that you're not white, Ben. But I digress. This is one of the actions that is being put forward in order to fully implement a white supremacist society. Everything that you see happening is in service of white supremacy. And at the end of the day, if this does happen, I'm going to urge my people to sit at home, because I'm afraid that if that pardon comes down, which doesn't take any time away from Derek Chauvin, it will be used to imprison us, and they will use that as these mass riots that were happening all over the country. Frankly, they're burning down cities to declare martial law and execute their white supremacist regime and dictatorship even the more. I don't know if it's going to happen, but at the rate that we're going, I'm concerned.
Hey, I would like to cordially invite you to my premiere. Did you know I premiere all of my videos? I have them every day, and I'm in the chat going back and forth with you guys live. So be on the lookout for notifications. And every day when we're in the premiere, I hear the same thing. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't get the notifications, which is something that I'm looking into, by the way.
What are you prepared to do about it? Don't let no one come into your house, take your meal, do what you need to do today.
Another way that you can help ensure you get those notifications is to subscribe to the channel. And also that helps amplify and boost our signal to make sure everybody is getting the message on all the good stuff that we got going on.
Message.
And of course, if you're interested in early access to the videos, the deep archive, the backstage, the extras, there is a link to membership in the description box to all of the videos. And if you like me, cheap is life. I remember my parents used to buy me shoes that were 3 sizes too big so I could grow into them. Well, the discount for the first month of the Patreon is running out, so make sure you take advantage of that at patreon.com/ReeseWaters. And all of you existing members, there's a code for you guys to try it for free for the first couple of months on me. Now, I want you to take a listen to something.
Turn me up a little bit, or just a little bit more. I got a message that I want to send across the world. Listen, baby.
Now that was sent in to us by Thomas Young, or as his friends call him, Preach.
Yeah, Ricky Fontaine. Pretty Ricky, what they call him.
For use on my Way of Waters channel. Well, I'm looking for the exact same thing on this channel. So if you are a musician or you know one and you got a cut of music that you wouldn't mind going hand in hand with some really good jokes and social justice commentary, go ahead and send it my way at admin@reesewaters.com. And now end, as I always do, with eternal gratitude for helping us get to this point.